Everyone, welcome. I'm really excited to introduce to you a man who really doesn't need an introduction. As the BAFTA-winning filmmaker of Tribe and other BBC productions like Arctic and The Amazon, many here are already fans of him. There are others here who might remember him actually from his more hedonistic days in Ibiza, and others who have just recently gotten involved following his recent move into the egalitarian society, or your attempts to recreate that. Anyway, regardless of what reason you're here, there's going to be plenty of anecdotes, personal stories, and some insights that we look forward to sharing with you. Isn't that right, Bruce?
Yeah, thanks, B. Lovely to be here. Sorry I'm so short. Half you guys at the back, I can see you just looking up because you can hardly see me, but really nice to be here and looking forward to it.
Don't say you're short, that makes me short. But all right, so let's jump right in. You were a Royal Marines commando, am I right?
Yeah.
Now, with that, there's an incredible amount of endurance, mental and physical. Do you think that that experience somehow lent itself to your later life as a traveler and trek leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that one has in one's life, whether it's positive or negative, obviously ends up bringing you into the fullness of who you become. And there's a lot of things that happened in my time in the Marines that certainly have served me. There's a lot of things also that I had to kind of try and undo as I left, and that's been a long journey. But things like the resilience, the confidence, the communication, the ability to physically push yourself, those side of things really definitely gave me a lot at an early age, which served me, yeah.
Was it hard to go from a world which was so stringently, you know, there were rules for everything you did, and then you kind of broke all those rules in the subsequent decade or two?
Yeah, hard. It was. I mean, but I had great help in the guise of girlfriends, basically, who took me on a journey of sweet pillow talk and pointing out that my ways were a little bit ridiculous.
Can we expand on that?
Yeah, why you stood to attention in front of the television, Bruce, with the national anthem on, get back into bed. That sort of thing.
And, you know, since you were doing all that, you were one of the first to sort of move from the military into creating these documentaries, into these more sort of manly, get into the wilderness. And since then there's been Bear Grylls and others. Why do you think that there is such a natural tendency for that now?
I don't know. I can't speak for the others. I know that when they loved it. I know that when Tribe became a success, the Discovery Channel was like, we want more, and I was resistant to just churning them out. So they went and found a load of other people, and it just became a genre. I mean, I think there's always been a bit of a genre in that space. I can't own it, of course, but I happened to be a really lucky time when it was just blooming again. I think there's a natural... it seems obvious that there's a role for people who've had that kind of background to fit into that. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, really.
But Tribe wasn't actually your first venture on film or with the BBC. You actually started out with a rather amusing name, Cannibals and Crampons, I believe, in 2002. I had to Google crampons. I thought it was something, it wasn't that. But do you want to go into a little bit about that, how you first got into that? How did you get noticed by the BBC?
Yeah, I was just super lucky. I mean, when I left my journey, I left the Marines and I got straight into expeditions. And so I used to lead these science and conservation trips to Asia, actually, and working with orangutans and turtles and rhino and tiger in Sumatra, Bali, Java, Sulawesi, you name it. So I was already in the world of expeditions for some time, and then I got into the film industry, and then Millennium came along, and I was kind of fed up with the film industry. I wasn't really blooming in it, and I felt I wanted that Millennium came along. I thought, I want to go and experience something that's very different to the normal New Year's celebration. So I thought, why don't I go and climb this mountain that I've always wanted to climb in the island of New Guinea, that when I was in this part of the world, I'd always seen this mountain, this snow-capped peak in the tropics, thinking, I'd love to go there. I wonder if anyone's ever been there. So the Millennium became the moment for me to do it. It's like, why don't I go there now? It's like, everyone else is going to these parties. I'll go somewhere they don't even know what Millennium is. Let's go to the Stone Age, as I called it back then. And so because I'd been in the film industry, a friend of mine said, well, why don't you take a camera? Why don't you film yourself? You're going anyway. And write a pitch. And so I wrote a pitch, and he put it in front of Ginger TV. They loved it. I got a bit of cash. They said, take a friend. So I took a mate, and we went and filmed this trip. Nearly died every day, and like just had but I mean, definitely the most exciting experience, the expedition that I've ever been on. And we came back, and they made a film, and it won awards around the world, and that kind of kicked it all off.
I mean, so these men, this tribe that you were with, are known as actually practicing cannibalism today. Did you witness any of that?
You've done your research. You're diving straight in, aren't you, me? Okay. Well, you know what? In all honesty, the type of person I was then, and the type of expeditions I was up to then, it was that sort of gung-ho, laddie, ego-driven, let's go and find people that no one's found, let's go and climb a mountain that no one's climbed, let's go and prove to the world that we are X and Y, or whatever it was that was the driving force of the reason that we went to do that. And yeah, we did hear about indigenous groups that had a long history of eating human flesh, and that it kind of excited us at that time, and so we wanted to go and see if, we were in that mindset. Yeah, I think that they're definitely in the deeper recesses of that place, because it's back then, even more so, it was like not very well visited. There were definitely some groups who had a history of that way of being that were probably still living a very traditional life that not many had been to. There was quite a lot of resistance from other tribes to go into that area and stuff. So we kind of boldly sauntered in. I don't know exactly what the group that we came across are like, but one thing I need to say at this point is like that word cannibalism is so loaded, it's like we then conjure the asterix and obelix stirring the pot, with like human bones in it, and think that it's all about just out killing people to eat them for protein, and actually it's I've since learned is much more complex than that, and there's many different ways and forms of what we could put under that bracket. The particular tribe where we started off, the Asmat, were famous for that type of being. They would go out and like do raids to go and find heads and bodies for all their rituals of marriage and birth and stuff. But the groups that we met were not like that. They were more timid. They still probably had human flesh eating in their society, but it was more a ritual for expelling witchcraft and things like that. Interestingly, where you find that type of human flesh eating in the world is generally in parts of the world where there's not much protein. I don't know if that's exactly why it's come about, but it often tends to be the case. And those areas of New Guinea and the islands around them, that's one of the things that they have. So anyway, yeah, I'm taking your jovial question and sort of subduing it a little bit, but yeah, we were all up for finding the cannibals.
I've got plenty more you can try and subdue. Good luck to you.
I know, yes, you're going to really have a go, aren't you? I can tell.
But so Tribe, obviously that was your big winner. That was your BAFTA. That was the first one. That's what every sort of, red-blooded male I know when they hear Bruce Parry thinks, oh yeah, Tribe, I could do that. I could do those drugs and put that thing through my nose, Like, what was it about tribes why have you to this day been so involved with the indigenous community?
Well, as I was suggesting a second ago, it's like my initial drive to go to these places was a more sort of, I guess, ego-driven, like adventurous spirit. But as a human being, having the great privilege of going to these places, one learns over time that, well, you meet people and you connect and you learn, and if you have an ounce of humanity inside you, you realize that these people are, have got a lot to teach us, but also often struggling in different ways and all sorts of stuff. So that sort of initial drive of it being about me and adventure it shifts a little bit into a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of us all in the world, and the fact that my way of life is having an impact on these people, and you just wake up to the bigger realities of what's going on. And also, when you step into the role of making a program that essentially is going to go around the world and millions of people are going to watch, and you're not an expert, you start learning fast. It's like, where's the book? You know, I need to learn this shit. It's like, I'm not a trained anthropologist. Where are the books on the knowledge base here? Who are the charities doing the stuff? I don't want to go out there and make a complete fool of myself. And having been in the Marines and had these wonderful experiences with girlfriends, especially of reflecting on myself and seeing that a lot of my previous preconceptions of life were actually really misplaced. And a lot of my very strong views I subsequently had to reevaluate. And that's a very humbling experience. And then it became really clear to me that if I went and lived with a tribal group with a strong prejudice of what I felt was right and wrong and what I thought was the right way to be, that if I got that wrong, that would be really embarrassing in an international space. So it was just really clear to me that the only way to approach going to visit these groups was to go in humbly and to listen, you know, and allow that to be the journey rather than going in with any preconceptions. And in its own sort of funny sort of way, that I think was part of its charm and part of the success of the series was that we just went in to listen and we wanted to humanize them. We went in to go, okay, guys, you know, who are you? What are you up to? Rather than, oh, and here we have the, you know, which might have been the previous way of doing it a few decades before.
But you didn't just go in and listen, as many documentarians tend to do. You fully immersed
I
yourself.
know where you're going to take this.
But you fully immersed yourself. And why did you feel that that was something that you needed to do? You needed to get involved in the initiation and in all the trials, etc. You couldn't just watch.
Yeah, of course, but like, you know, it's a no-brainer really, isn't it? If you're going to try and learn about a group of people, you've got to like hang out and do what they do. And it became really clear to me, it wasn't like a game show that I had to be like the tribe, but when you go and live with a group of people, you want to be like them. And so, yeah, I would take my malaria pills because they couldn't see me do that. But I wouldn't put drops of iodine in my water every time I drank because they would go, well, that's different to what we're doing. Why are you doing that? So for me, it wasn't about it being a strict, must be like this, must be like that. It was more like, I just want for you to see that I'm trying to live like you are so that you can see that I'm respecting you in your space. And I used to make rules up in my sort of initial chat when I got to meet them. It's like, you just got to treat me like a kid this high, you know, this age, who's like who doesn't know much, but he's keen to learn and he's got to learn. And I'm a family member, I'm not a guest. You've got to get it into your heads, I'm not a guest. And they would like love that, and then they could picture that, and through that process, then they would send me to get the water, they would send me to get the wood, I would be an attentive member of the family within the community or within the house. And it was that took a few days, but suddenly they're like, oh, now we get it, now we know what he's here for. And that's when it shifted. And then they begin to open up that next layer of like, oh yeah, this is what we think, what we believe. And it's a no-brainer really. Every one of us who's really traveled, it's what we all do. You work hard to make yourself as good a guest as you can, or as good a member of the family as you can, so that you say thank you for looking after me, and I'm kind of curious. And so yeah, that was the way to do it, and I think the results are on the screen.
Before I move on to some questions which I actually canvassed a couple of people for, I wanted to touch very quickly on your film Tawai, which came out last year but actually had the Asia premiere here last night at the Hive Spring. And for those that haven't seen it yet, I was wondering if you wanted to give a brief sort of intro into what your core message was and what it was that you wanted to instill in the people that watched it.
Thanks, B.
You're welcome.
Oh. Hey everyone, you ready?
You can talk to the camera if you want.
No, I'll be brief. Well, although I wasn't yesterday, was I? My lord, I went.
Should I just tap you?
Yeah, you tapped me. My God, I just was trying to churn it all out. You didn't miss anything. No, I was, I was very lucky making these programs for the BBC. Tribe being one series, or a few series, but one type. And then going down the Amazon looking at globalization, going around the Arctic looking at climate change, it became really clear to me that I needed to look at myself and reevaluate my way of living and the way that I was interacting with my consumption in particular. And also that there was this like layer of learning that I was having the great privilege of receiving from my time with these tribal peoples that wasn't necessarily coming out in the programs that I was making. And although I was really proud and happy with the programs, I knew that I kind of owed it to you, the audience, and also to the tribes to like go deeper and show this stuff. So basically I left the Beaver. I mean, I asked the Beaver if they wanted to do it, but I don't think they understood me. And also I wanted to get into philosophy and sort of society and sort of challenge some thoughts that we hold dear in our society, and the Beaver wasn't the place for that. So they gave me their blessing and said, off you go, Bruce, and make your own thing. And it took a lot longer than I thought it would. I thought I'd be back in 9 months. It took me 7 years. But I basically went off to make this film, and ultimately the film is that exactly. It's a deeper look at the sort of things that I was learning, that I was experiencing in my own time and my own journey. It's a bit of a spiritual journey, to be honest. It looks at connection to nature, looks at how we used to be, especially before agriculture, how we used to meditate on a daily basis through hunting and gathering as a form of being present and in your senses and body, and how that might have shifted over time, and the net result of the way that we then experience our relationship to each other and to nature might have shifted into this way that we are now, where we see nature as just a resource to be used. Whereas at one time we felt ourselves as part of it and understood empathically that our actions in the wider world to each other and to the natural world have massive implications, which we've kind of lost a little. So it goes into that: what is connection, what is consciousness, what is it to be on this planet as one. So that's the kind of realm we go into. I probably put all of you off watching it. So it was a complex subject matter, and then to try and tell that story to an audience that, knowing myself from where I've come from, the background that I had was like, you try to talk to me about meditation or spirit, I'll be like, what? Yeah, shut up, that's absolute nonsense. So I understood from my own journey that if I wanted to talk to the type of people who wouldn't normally be receptive to this, that I needed to really get my language right. I needed to take out all the red flags of terms that put people off. I needed to find a pathway through using intelligence and people that we haven't already come to preconceptions about, like tribes who are still, really feeling something, and make a logical progression of the narrative so that it made sense. And all those things proved actually incredibly hard to do. I don't know that we did achieve that fully, but certainly we tried our best. And the results so far have been quite good. There's definitely some opening up that's come from various people who've seen it. And that was our challenge, is to make a film not for just my friends, but to try and make a film that really invites us all to look at ourselves, to look at the way we live our life, and to look at our beliefs, and to look at our feelings. So there you go, in a nutshell. Not such a nutshell.
That was a Bruce nutshell, actually. I will give you that. That was a Bruce nutshell. But I think something probably people want to know is, you go away for a considerable amount of time. I'm not sure in the 7-year period how long you were actually with the tribes. How long was it?
It depends. For 6 weeks when I was doing tribe, between 3 and 6 weeks. And then the making of this film, about 3 or 4 weeks each tribe, yeah.
And are there ways that you prepare first, to leave your regular life and enter into this, tribe, this very different world, and then also acclimatizing back into your regular life?
Yeah, in the early days when I was doing tribe, I realized if I used to go on an expedition and go and climb a mountain, that I could always acclimatize very quickly, especially to the pathogens of the place and the tummy bugs and all the rest of it. You can just, take a sip one day and spit it out, and then a few days later you can clean your teeth. You can just gradually acclimatize to the environment. But making tribe, within 24 hours of arriving, I'd be living in a family where their idea of hygiene is very different to ours. And the food would be passed around, and the loos would be next door, and the puddles would be drinking out of, and all the rest of it I was just doing as they were. So I had to prepare myself for that in one way. So I used to just eat mouldy food and never ever take antibiotics, and basically just try and build up my gut flora and fauna as best I could. And that seemed to work because I pretty much didn't get ill. I mean, I get ill one day, but I was literally drinking out of the puddles that the camels and pigs and whatever were wallowing through. You know, so meanwhile the crew who are drinking bottled water and using and get sick as dogs. So I was quite proud of that. And then preparation mentally, yeah, I mean, obviously you just read as much as you can, but I didn't. I'd mostly read anthropological texts, and there was everywhere we always went with someone who knew the place and knew the people. So the great advantage I had was that I would have someone who would introduce me to a family they knew. And the way that we arrived in the tribes was generally, so they knew we were coming because we had done our research, and then we had done a recce. I didn't do the recce, someone else did. We'd then go through the whole process of figuring out the gift exchange, which is a huge thing. That has to be done very sensitively to make sure you don't imbalance that group in relation to other groups, and the whole thing is so complex and needs to be done very well. So all of that would be organized, and then we would agree on it, and then 6 months later or whatever it is, then we would come. Again, generally with someone who has worked with them and knows them, which would often be an anthropologist. Sometimes it would be an adventure guide or someone, but someone who knew the group. We'd come in and we'd film my arrival with the circus has arrived, and here's the guy up front. And then generally, once we filmed that, we would then put tools like cameras down and spend then the next 2 or 3 days creating a crew camp outside of the village, so that the crew are set up. Meanwhile, we would have meetings with the chief and the villagers and say, okay, you guys up for this character Bruce coming to live with one of you? They would always, so far, they've always said yes, and they would find the right family for me. And then once the crew camp's set up, then I would then procession into the community and then move into the house. And then for at least the whole first week, I would not visit the crew area. I would live, eat, breathe, sleep, everything with that family. And we would be filming then every day. But the crew only film in the day. And at night, that was up to me. And generally, even the interpreter, because we'd always have at least 2 interpreters with us. One who was with me to get me through the process of, obviously, just conversation. And then one also back in the crew area who would be taking the rushes, the filmed material from the day before with computers and cameras and just writing down everything verbatim that was spoken. So they'd be listening and watching and then writing it all down so that we left the area with everything absolutely as it was spoken. Whereas my interpreter could be much more rough and ready and keep it flowing. But the interpreter often wouldn't stay at night because they often come from town, and they refused to sleep in a mud hut or a tree house or an igloo or whatever it was. So that I would often be there on my own, and then I could generally communicate until the fire died out because it would be sign language, and then after that, we'd all sleep anyway. So that was pretty much the routine. And then every day we would just see, what are you guys doing? Let's go hunting, let's go and see what they're up to, and then I would join the most exciting thing, and off we'd go.
So it's fair to say that your endurance level is, pretty strong, pretty high level.
I think all these things you just get acclimated, you get accustomed, don't you?
So if there was one thing you just can't get accustomed to, something that is just uncomfortable to your core, what would it be out of all your experiences?
Well, I only ever said no to one thing.
Tell me.
Well, that you probably know the answer.
I think I do.
You're such a meanie. The only time I ever said no was when my friend Bofo Quo had my willy in his hands and was trying to force it back inside my body.
I was going to let you say that one, but yeah, that was what I meant.
I thought that's where you were going.
Okay, so moving away from that, how about...
Do you want me to tell you that story?
Do you want to tell the story?
I'll tell you the story.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah, I'll tell you the story. So what you don't know, if ever you watch that clip again, is that the dear Bofo Crow was really into me. He had actually come on to me in the treehouse the night before. So, as I said, you know, when there's no interpreter with me, we were with the Korowai people who live in tree houses. They were one of the groups of people that are in New Guinea who are famous for eating human flesh. And so sometimes I say a gay naked cannibal came on to me in a tree house, but I won't say that today. So this lovely guy, Bofo Crow, there's three guys, we're all sleeping in the tree house, the fire dies down, and well, no, actually, I'm not going to go into it. Anyway,
you were setting the scene there.
He's kind of into me, but so the next day if you ever see that clip again, you see the big cheesy grin on his face. So basically, and guys, I'm really sorry, this is a bit of a squirm, but like let's just get it over with. So I've been putting bone through my nose and all that sort of stuff to hang out with them, and I really want to say that wasn't just TV nonsense. He was really, really, really excited by me doing this, you know. And I remember at one point when I had this thing put through, and he was like sign languaging to me in the night one time, and he's like, "If you come back and you don't have that in, I don't want to know, you know. This is you now." So that was my interpretation of his sign language, but I really believe that's what he said. And, you know, and they loved it that I was, and they always did. They like, some people come in their cars and they take photos, but you want to come and be with us. And so that was generally always the reception I had, was that they really appreciated me trying to just be with them and take on some of what they did. And it wasn't just a thing for the cameras. It was a deep bonding. So anyway, in this instance, one of the things that they do, if you're naked, because these guys are totally naked, apart from they'd wear a bit of rattan around their waist, which is a thing you take off and occasionally rub through a stick to light a fire, and then one bow and maybe 2 arrows, and that was it. Apart from the women wear a grass skirt, and the men would do one of 2 things with their penis. Because if you imagine you're running through the jungle, your testicles kind of, well, some of you imagine, some of you know, testicles kind of have their own buoyancy, but the penis is a little kind of got a mind of its own, as we know, and so it kind of flaps all over the place. So they have to find something to do with it, and one of the things they do is they like stick a hollowed out gourd vegetable on it and then tie it up, and you will have seen pictures of people with like, and some of the tribes have huge ones and others little, you know. So they've got like what they call a penis gourd or koteka, and other thing that they do is that they just tuck the penis back inside the body. Anyway, so I'm with these guys, and like I'm naked, and he just kneels in front of Bofo Crow, who kneels in front of me, and I don't have the guts or want to push him away, but I've got 2 translators to get through to get to him. So I'm like going, I'm not so sure about it. Anyway, before I managed to finally say, again, push him away. If you imagine, this is the bad bit, I'm sorry. If you imagine you had a sausage roll, and you sealed one end and you squeezed it, the meat would shoot out, right? Yeah. So what he does is he got my foreskin and he rolled it over, and then he grabbed my dick and he just and in it went, and like, oh my God! All I know is that the cameraman was here and the director was there. The cameraman is filming me and the director's talking. I can't hear a word. It's like ringing in my ears. I'm like white and I'm pouring with sweat, feeling like I'm going to faint. It doesn't hurt. It's just like the weirdest feeling. And so I just sort of lie back down on the grass with my legs in the air, because that's what you'll do if you're going to faint. You've got to get blood back. So like there's me with half a dick missing and like lying down. Anyway, that was the story.
I regret that question. And I apologize to my family that are actually watching. On that note,
On that note, let's have another note.
Yeah, so that was with the Combine tribe where you had the thorn shoved through your nose, which was really quite shocking to watch. And then on top of that, I think quite a few people here have probably watched on YouTube on repeat, you vomiting, doing all these mind-altering drugs in these initiation programs. And it doesn't look fun. What so far has been the most excruciating or painful, and I mean like physically painful experience for you?
Other than the thing I just described.
No.
You know what? Eating a burger was really hard. That was
a burger?
A burger is a root of a shrub that they eat in Gabon, well, in the Congo. Some called pygmy people, the various groups. I was with not the Benjeli, they were the Babongo, true name, Babongo people, and it's another psychoactive substance that they take as an initiation ritual. And lots of people, when you hear about taking ayahuasca or iboga or these various things, they think that the trip itself is the hard bit. But no, for them and for me, the eating of the root was the initiation. That was the hard bit. It was like, and I've eaten like lots of weird shit, and I can do it. The bugs and grubs and live beetles and whatever intestines, it's all fine. But this was hard because the rest of the stuff, you can eat a cockroach or whatever, and you just imagine it's a prawn. It's no different, really. It's just a question of turning something off in your mind, and they don't taste that bad. It's just the thought of it that's difficult. But this was hard because it actually tasted very, 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 very difficult. It was like, it's like wood, so you're not allowed to drink water, and this goes on for like 12 hours, or 8 to 12 hours, and they're just feeding you this wood, and so you're not allowed to drink water, and so it's like you can't crunch it down, it's very, very difficult to swallow, but the really hard bit is it's like acid, it's like battery acid. I don't know if ever you've had a leaked battery from your torch, and you get it on your fingers and you touch it, just like that acrid, acidic horror, and each mouthful was like wood, like that, and then you can't swallow it, and your gag reflex is that was absolutely the hardest thing that I had to eat by a long way, and then you go into like a whole day of tripping and all the rest of it, but you didn't ask me about that.
Well, I'm about to. So I've got to ask you about ayahuasca. I mean, it seems like everyone's talking about it right now, and you are very fond of ayahuasca. You've admitted in the past it's not necessarily the most pleasant experience, but that you have found really great after effects from it, and it's really changed your life. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because the BBC knew, or at least the team in the BBC knew, that I was kind of into this. And having been a Marine and having grown up in a family that was very anti-drugs and very institutionalized, I grew up as someone who saw anything like that as like just bad, evil, no good. There's nothing, I would have called the police if I'd seen someone smoke a spliff when I was in the Marines. It's like I was fully not in that realm. And then once again, girlfriends helped me out to go down a different path. And anyway, it came to me doing these things on television, and so Iboga was the first one. Actually, that was the first episode of Tribe we ever made, and like I remember talking to the director because we didn't know what the program was going to be about at the time. It's like, well, I'm just hanging out with these people, and they said, "Do you want to do this thing?" And I was like, well, the director was like, "You don't have to, mate." You're like, God, why would you want to go and look at yourself to that degree? There's I remember his words clearly, and like he was the series producer of the whole series, of all of the stuff I've ever done, and he's like, there's a reason we have a subconscious to put a lid on stuff and forget about it, and like, why do you want to go lifting that lid off and investigating all that weird shit? And that I know is a pretty standard thought process for many people in the world today, and yet here I was faced with, okay, am I going to lift that lid off and have an investigation? Because we can all live our lives very, very easily without going through that process and go, oh, yeah, I'm a nice guy, and on we go without actually really sitting with the real analysis of whether or not I am actually a positive influence on the planet or on my friends or on myself. And, we run very fast often to avoid having to stop and deal with that thought or that feeling. So to be invited on that in my very first show, and there's like, you don't have to do this, Bruce. This is like not what we, this is not why we're here. And I was like, no, I think I will. And it was, I remember the build up to it. It was, and I even talk a bit about it in the show. It's like, it's like I'm about to look at this. I'm about to look at myself. This is like terrifying, because normally you don't have to think about that. So on we come later on at ayahuasca. We'll talk about and why is it that I've become an advocate for these things? Because yes, you see me vomiting. Yes, you see the trauma that I go through in the process of that, and also the BBC has edited it in such a way, and understandably so, because it was illegal in our nation state, where it's left rather ambiguously as to what I really made of it. And so actually, even to today, I have people come up to me in the street and go, oh my God, you're that guy. They say, you're the guy that gets naked and does drugs. But then they'll go, but like, isn't that look horrible, that thing, poor you, having to go through the process of doing that, that just looked terrible. I mean, the edit was such that I didn't really express my deeper realizations or feelings about what actually happened to me. They're like, Bruce, you like this shit too much. We can't put it in the show. So I'd like wax lyrical, and they're like, it never made it to the edit. So it remains in the realm of the ambiguity. But the reality was that yes, of course they were traumatic and difficult and hard to look at yourself. But how could that not be a positive thing in your life? If you allow and trust and accept that these people and this medicine as they see it is there for exactly that reason. It is there as a medicine that it allows you to reflect on yourself. It's a medicine that sort of heals the psyche, if you will. We have medicines, most of which come from plants in our hospitals, in our doctors. They're all plant-based medicines to some degree, and we've got things for every type of ailment, but one that they have, because they have their own, but they also have this other set of medicines which are for the psyche, it's for reconnection, it's for feeling beyond the material into the spiritual realm and all of those sorts of things. And we have very successfully over time, probably starting with the ducking of the witches and all of that sort of stuff that came about from inquisitions and all those sorts of things that challenged different orthodoxies. That's by the by, but the fact is that we live in a world today whereby we, like myself being an example of it, grown up with a deep fear of anything that might alter the mind or that might invite that sort of self-reflection. And yet for them, that's a needed part of society. So to go and live with people who've had that continual lineage of shamanistic practice, where they know how to deal with someone who's having a difficult time, where they know how the dosage to give and how to hold ceremony and how to sing song and how to be together. It's part of their culture, and so they're expert at it. So to be in that space with those people and then to go through that process and then in sort of the loving arms of that community be given opportunity to reflect on yourself. And it's not like going to a shrink who's going to just tell you you're like this or like that, because you can always egoically lock swords and go, I don't believe that. But when you're actually seeing it for yourself, one thing that everyone who does that, we all come away with is like, there's no denying it. You're seeing for yourself in the most humbling way. It's like, fuck, that is me. I am like that. Yes, I behave like that. Yes, I'm ignoring this, or I'm doing that, or I'm inflicting pain. And that's the most amazing gift. And it's painful. And then it doesn't make you a better person. It just invites you to open the window and look at yourself and go, am I going to change? Am I going to actually go back into my life and carry on doing that? Or am I going to try and alter my ways in some way? And often the thing is, it doesn't make you feel like you're bad. It just often shows you why it is that perhaps you're doing that. And so often these things are happening as a result of like trauma from childhood. You know, I'm being defensive because I'm feeling pain as a result of neglect from a parent or whatever. So often you'll go back and relive a moment, and then interestingly, what might have been a sort of neural pathway of reaction to a certain thing, suddenly you're, as an adult, you're being able to see that thing that made you behave like that as a child, and then reevaluate it from a wiser, older perspective, and find a new neural pathway in order to be able to react differently to that thing that previously you were being defensive or aggressive about. What an amazing gift. And yeah, it's not an instant cure. It's not perfect. And not everyone changes that much. But it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. And generally people who've done those sorts of things come away feeling deeply humbled and deeply grateful, deeply connected. And why wouldn't I want to say that's a good thing that we need in our lives? That's amazing. And yeah, I know that there's complications. Yes, I know that any one of us facing childhood trauma and all the rest of it, if it's not held well, we can lead to all sorts of complications. It can, you know, this stuff isn't kids stuff. It needs holding correctly. And I'm not just trying to sit here in a crowd and say, go out and do it. You know, you've got to do your research. You've got to be ready. But it is a tool that's missing in our society. The other thing I noticed when I do these sorts of substances is you also, when you go in and you have all these things, the sort of psychological healing aspect, but there's another thing that goes on often too, is you do feel this sense of connection. You do feel, I mean, it's a classic psychedelic chat, if you will, but like this sense of oneness, this sense of feeling connected to something that is beyond the self. This sort of, the fact that the material body isn't the limits to who I am, and that actually you can feel, and it's a very visceral feeling that can't be described in language, because language just can't go there. But the feeling is incredibly real, that actually nature and myself are connected in a much deeper way than I previously thought. And a sense of empathy that can expand as a result of that. Like if you know, you just don't want to chop a tree down. You don't want to go to war. You feel empathically connected. Your pain is my pain as a human being, but also nature. The way I treat nature is going to in some way reflect on how nature treats me. And the well-being of the natural world is my own well-being too. And so you get this sense of connection in a really real way. And that's another thing I think that's as we all can probably see, much needed in society, in the global society today. So yeah, I am an advocate. It took me a long time to have the courage to say that, but because well, it's illegal in many countries, and it's and there's clearly not a simple thing to just wave a flag and say this is great. But I believe that I've had immense positive outcomes from every time I've done it, and I've done it many, many times now. I'm still a fuck up, but I'm getting better.
Well, you mentioned your producers were like, you know, Bruce, you love this too much, which, as you said, that sort of your reputation precedes you. You know, a lot of people here, some people here actually met you in Ibiza in those days, and I think that's where we ought to go next. No, we won't go into Ibiza, but we'll go just to quickly, you know, you were a party boy in Ibiza, and that, you know, if you go on his Wikipedia, in his picture, he's actually got this mohawk, and he's like, it is a very dramatically different Bruce. But a couple of years ago, you actually, over a 5-year period, did, and I apologize if the timing's a bit wrong, please correct me if I do get them wrong, that over a 5-year period, you sort of went celibate and also off drugs and off alcohol for like a 1.5 year stints during that time. Which was the worst to get off, and how the hell was that experience?
So, where to start with that one? Okay. Yeah, so, you know, while I was learning all these deep and profound things in one way, about simplifying life and being more connected and all the rest of it. At the same time, I was on this conveyor belt of notoriety and being a celebrated life and money and material in another direction. So I was in this slightly conflicted space, and I moved to Ibiza for many reasons, but within that package is this realm of celebration too. And so I did, for the first few years of being there, got very embroiled in that and loved it and don't regret a moment of it. It was amazing. I had a very, very fun time. And for any of you who've only just heard the reputation of that place, it's not that. It's amazing. It's like lots of really beautiful things about living on that island full time that's very different to the touristic sort of reputation that it has. But it's true that also that I dove in deep to enjoy myself, and there's nothing wrong with that, and the tribes do that too. Except that, of course, over time I was also learning that while it's okay to celebrate in life, it's good to measure that, and I felt my work was important, and I was away for months at a time, so I come back and I hit the parties hard and enjoyed it. But it did become harder over time when I was seeing more and more of what my lifestyle was like and how that was affecting other parts of the world. That made me reevaluate some of that. But the main reason that I gave up everything was because I basically was going to make a program with this group of people called the Kogi, who really interesting civilization in Colombia. They were like one of the few civilizations that were around when Columbus arrived. The Aztecs, the Incans, the Mayans, and then there's this people called the Tairona people actually, but now they're called the Kogi. And it's where the Spanish first arrived in Santa Marta, and then they coexisted for about 80 years, and then they ran up into the mountains and hid, and they're pretty much the only intact civilization, pre-Columbus civilization still around, that's still holding on very much to its previous cultural traits. And so they're really interesting, and they've got a special way of training some of their leaders in darkness for like their first 18 years of life and stuff. I mean, like kind of out their group. And I remember going to visit them after doing the Amazon, and we were thinking about making a film with them, and they very rarely let people in. But they invited me to make this film, and they have a very particular spiritual belief where they see everything as being created in this mental realm and then taking shape in the material thereafter. And it's all this very, very sort of it fits in quite strongly with a lot of New Age theories about manifestation and connection and oneness and stuff. And so I was a little bit unsure, but the reality of meeting these people was how amazing they were. They were super different to anyone else I'd ever come across. And anyway, as I was leaving, what they said, because they'd made a program 20 years before with the BBC, and with this guy Alan Herrera, who was with me on this second visit. And they said, well, 20 years ago we told you about our stuff, but now we're going to show you how it is that we do these things. And I was suddenly like overwhelmed with the excitement of the possibility that I might be shown some of the secrets of this group who may or may not be able to transcend what we consider to be the sort of material laws of physics. And like they were going to do something. I was like, what? I mean, wow, am I really going to be the guy that... So I got in some really deep space about the possibilities of this show. And so I said to them at the end, like, how can I best prepare? And they said, oh, easy, just give up sex, drugs, alcohol, all the things that you're normally distracted by, and maybe you might get yourself into a space where you understand a little bit better about where we're coming from. So I'm like, well, initially I was like, no way. And then they were like, then I was like, no, maybe, so I decided I was going to do this. And like, I know this is a bit of a long story, but I'll give it to you only because it's got something in it, I think. So I went back to my home in Ibiza, and I just started a relationship, and we hadn't really started off as best as I thought. So I thought, well, I'll just make that bit good, and then we'll stop the sex. and so sure enough, we went through a night together, and literally, like as soon as we finished, I got this text saying that there was a problem with the film and it wasn't going to be made. And one thing I forgot to mention as I was leaving Colombia with the Coggy people, these people who were around them said to me, Bruce, you do understand that if you don't follow what it is that they've invited you to now follow, that you're not, it won't work for you to come back. They're going to know. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's madness. And they're like, no, this is this very super special group who are connected to the universal consciousness. They're like the most meditative people on the planet, and they like fully, and if you...
And they read the Daily Mail, so they'd know if you were doing this stuff, right?
They'd read the Daily Mail. So they were like, they're going to know. And I'm like, listen, look, I'm really into, I've done all my tribe, and look, I'm really into notions of connection and stuff, but like, I can't believe for a second that these people are going to somehow influence whether I come back or not, and that I'm just not going there. So anyway, I get this text straight after having sex. Oh, it's just coincidence, nothing more than that. Anyway, I go off to India and Colombia and India and Nepal and escape Ibiza. And anyway, I meet this girlfriend again in India about a month later, and we basically go through a similar moment, and I literally a moment that concluded it, kind of get another text. This time the film's off, and then in that moment, I'm like faced with this decision. It's like, okay, so normally that would be that's another coincidence. But there was a part of me that's like, I really want to make this film. This is like, and then it dawned on me. It's like, shit, Bruce, you're the guy who the strapline for the tribe show, Bruce Parry, be one of the tribe. It's like, I've gone there, and yes, I've lived in these houses, and I've been the best guest I could ever be, and I've really learned, and I've gained so much, and I've opened up, and there's so much that I have changed. But the one thing that's never changed is that I've never actually given you credit for your belief systems being anything more than essentially superstitious stuff catching up with us in the scientific realm. That was it. It's like, what do you know? We're the guys. You'll catch up. That was where I was, and I was like, fuck, how arrogant that I have never even considered really the possibility that the way you're looking at the world may have something in it. I've always taken the superior view. And I thought, well, hey, why don't I just try on their belief system for a bit? I just put on that hat for a little while and just check it out. And I can always put my other hat back on later. Why don't I explore for a short while the possibility that my actions are having repercussions that are actually felt beyond, like my thoughts even are influencing things. Like this whole realm of connection is so much more than just the material. Why don't I explore the possibility that these people, through 18 years of sitting in a cave without any light, are able to tune into something that I have no idea about? Who am I to say that doesn't mean something? If I'm really going to investigate this, I should investigate it. I can't just sit there always with my superior place going, isn't this interesting? Oh, look at these people. It's like, no, why don't I investigate this like I say I do and try it on their hat? And I did, and literally my whole life changed. The next, from minute to minute, from 1 minute to the next, it's like, wow, suddenly there was magic in everything, that things flowed for me in a really beautiful way. And then, I mean, it really was the most extraordinary experience. But I was like, shit, I can't dive into this realm too much because I'll become a complete out-and-out hippie and like lost to the nether regions of madness. And so I thought, well, I've got to keep a foot in, don't worry, I went there later. I got to keep a foot in both worlds so that I can communicate back to my audience, the people who trust me and listen to me, what this is like. So, and things were happening to me that felt like, okay, this is more than a coincidence. This is like, oh my God. And the more that I was buying into that as a possible way of being, the more magic seemed to come into my life. But then occasionally I'll be like, whoa, stop, Bruce, this is too much. So I'd stop back and then analyze it, thinking, is this coincidence, isn't it? And of course then the magic would disappear straight away. As soon as the analysis came in, it would all become very linear and analytical.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but what was it that was the benefit out of giving up those three, I don't know, vices, some might say?
So I went off on a big story, didn't I? Well, I do think that actually a shift in belief system came about, and this is a part of it. I mean, obviously the other things like giving up sex and drugs and alcohol had amazingly beautiful aspects to my life, especially giving up sex. It was the hardest by a long way. Drugs and alcohol was easy. Giving up sex really changed my relationship with the energy flows within my body and how it was that I was relating to people, where the drive was coming from, and what it was that I was after, and the type of... Because getting rid fully of any notion at all that I was going to get anything from the experience of meeting someone allowed me to meet in a different way. And then also the meditation and stuff, I was genuinely feeling what I can only describe as like electrical or energetic flows within my body, whereby I was feeling a change in where I was connecting. And it all shifted to my chest area. Whereas previously I hadn't even noticed it because it was so embedded in who I was, but it was coming from a much lower place. And that sounds really sort of weird and obvious, but actually it was just so normal to me that I hadn't even thought about it. And then suddenly it's like, oh my God, I'm being filled up in this other space, and like I'm having this amazing connection, and it's got nothing to do with what I want or need. It's just like, wow, here's this other human being that's amazing. And yeah, so many other people may already have that, but for me, as an ex-Marine, red-blooded guy on the party scene, that was a huge shift. So yeah, many things that came about, but another one was this shift in belief and seeing that my actions and my thoughts, and that this is an interconnected realm.
We have 5 more minutes and 2 more questions before we have a quick 10-minute break, where you're very welcome to head outside the exits over there. We have a beautiful terrace for all the people who need to smoke, but also just enjoy the greenery. But then we also got the drinks at the back. And finally, that we actually have Q&A cards. I'd just like to remind everyone, because the next section after we finish is going to be all your questions. But before we get there, Bruce, I have 2 last questions for you. They're not those kind of questions. You're safe now. You've talked about things that I wasn't anticipating, and I sort of did. Anyway, so first question, do you still feel fear? Because you've been kidnapped, you've been held at knife point, there were crocodiles, I don't know. Do you still feel fear?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I can't think what of. A fear of not being a good, I'm not even a dad, but like fear of getting that wrong. That's a big one. Fear that if I have kids, that there's going to be that I'm bringing someone into the planet that's like that we're living in a difficult space. Fear of of just not being the best of myself that I can be, just that's a fear. I know that I still have lots of sort of stuff that trips me up in my life, and I can see it, and I'm trying to work on it, and I think that there's a fear that I'm struggling and not going to be able to, and those sorts of things. That's a fear. There's fear as far as kidnaps and crocodiles and stuff. No.
Which just by the way, I asked him earlier if it was true that he'd been kidnapped, and his reaction was kind of, and I was like, what do you mean kind of? And Bruce goes, I mean, there was a dude with a gun, and it was 3 days in the desert. This is a badass guy.
Yeah, I mean, those sorts of things. It was funny because like every time I pointed the camera at him, he pointed the gun at me, and I was like, yeah. But actually, there wasn't fear because I didn't think he was going to pull the trigger. I just thought that it's funny how the mind can take over. I was in that particular instance. Yeah, there was some dude who came along and tried. We were doing a camel crossing of the hottest desert in the world, the Danakil Depression in Ethiopia, and we'd just been in this village, and they'd been kind of trying to ransack us a little bit. So we managed to escape, and this guy then came, followed us and came. It was like 50-something degrees, and it was hot. And so we were like under the only acacia tree in the whole of this huge expanse, but behind a dune, so that we couldn't see the village. But we knew the village wasn't far away, and then he came to us. And so then he was like doing all this, like, and we were like, you're not gonna shoot us because you're too close to the village, and they'll hear it, and then you'll have to share your stuff. So, nah, we're not gonna. So, you know, that wasn't scary because you can just, you know, because it was very unlikely he was going to do it. So I think those sorts of moments. It's like when we were with the Suri and there's guns and stuff. A lot of the crew were like, and I just didn't think. It just, I don't know. You can just be rational about these things, and like the fear can disappear. Until they start getting drunk, then you decide to leave. So yeah, I'm not that fearful of those things, but other stuff, yeah.
Okay, finally, any regrets? In one sentence.
No, not really. No, I mean, like, there's definitely. You look. I think it's really healthy to look at all of the things that happen to you in life as medicine, as lessons, as learning, and even the things that seemed incredibly difficult when you were younger. Of course, they help shape who you are today, and that's it, you know. And I would hate not to have had them in a way, because here I am, and you get through it, and you're wiser and stronger for it. I've been incredibly privileged that I haven't like lost limbs or anything from silly accidents, but so, you know, I'm still in one space. I wish I hadn't taken. I mean, this film that I've just made took a long time, and like I lost a lot of health for 2 years sitting at a computer in the edit suite, and my eyesight and waistline and everything went off a cliff, and you're like, that was hard. But at the same time, I'll get it back, so it's all good.
It's always easy to get a waistline back. Anyway, thank you so much. We're going to take a 10-minute break. And please don't forget to write your questions. We only want your questions for the next session. Enjoy.